Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm doing a rapid-fire review for Colosseum from Fantasia Games. Rapid-fire reviews are a format on the channel where I try to tell you about the game, give you my thoughts and opinions, all in 10 minutes or less. Sometimes I make it, and sometimes I don't, but first and most importantly, this is a prototype. All rules and components subject to change. I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. We even have some, mixed stuff, so we have, the wooden components, but also we have, the miniature components and things like that. It's just, there's lots of options to get your hands on this game, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. I think I said that already, and I just burned 7 seconds repeating it and then repeating that again, so we're gonna go ahead and dive into this. Colosseum is a Days of Wonder game, I believe, from 2007, if I'm not mistaken. TMG then did a reproduction of the game much later, and this is Fantasia Games taking on the game, but also making some changes to the gameplay. So there is some streamlining, reducing the game from 5 rounds to 4 rounds, making it so you have more buy actions, things like that, just trying to speed up the general gameplay while giving you the same good experience. To that end, the general arc of the game is across 4 rounds of play. You are trying to put on the best performance possible, but you need performers to do that. And so in general, in the game, you're going to be bidding on these various performers in order to get them so that you can then put on these various performances that require certain types of performers and reward you with points based on how well you do. The problem is everything in the game costs money. I should also note, by the way, I don't have everything set up just for table visibility, so I don't have all the expensive performances set up over here. There's another board, just in case you see that and you're like, that's wrong. It is wrong, I know. But in general, you are trying to place on these performances, which means you need to get your hands on performers. That's the general crux of the game. You're trying to escalate how good of a performance you can put on in order to put on the best possible performance and score as many points as possible, but you have to work your way up to there because you get paid for all the stuff you do in the game, which means you need to get money to buy more stuff, to buy money to buy more stuff, not to buy money, to get performers to do more stuff and put on the best performances. That's the general arc. As far as what that's going to look like, in each round you're going to first make 2 investments. Investments are things you can do to basically spend money on stuff that will help you in the game. Gates are going to be essential to allow you to put on more important performances, as indicated on each performance that tells you the number of gates you need. Your starting ones are going to require those only 2, but you'll need more and more as you go through it, so you want to work your way up to those 4 gates. It also helps you on the board as these various nobles move around the board, giving you more room, more effectively more points for the performances you put on. You also have cheerers. These people that are over here, you can add them to your board, and these will add 5 points to each performance. You basically have a hype men. They're hype men. You're buying hype men in the game. You can place temples on the board in order to have the ability to control the dice a bit more. So you all these different things you can try to invest in while you try to work your way towards the performances, and then of course there's the performances themselves. But when you're done with this investment phase, in which each player can buy 2 things, you're going to move on to going ahead and actually getting your performers. That's where players can go ahead and take the marker and say, boom, I'm saying that we are bidding on this section. There's small little sections, you can see them broken up over here, but you're going to be bidding on specific sections of the game in order to decide which performers you're trying to add to your tableau over here, and you can win multiples. You do have to balance your money in this game. Money is so tight, especially at first. You have to balance all of that. But basically the way it works is I sit there and I say, we are bidding off that section. And then we go through the bidding process. If I win the bid, I'm done. It moves on to the next player, we refill. If I lose the bid, then I can go ahead and choose the next section. And that's where you're playing a game of trying to sometimes tease other players into bidding on things that you think they want in order to reduce their pool of money. And other times you're just going full on for what the thing that you want right away is in order to get those performers. But don't worry, because the next player has a chance to go ahead and start the bidding, and you can go ahead and get their performance as well. So you have the opportunity to buy multiple things, but it is going to reduce as you go through it. Once you're done with that phase, you're going to go ahead and trade performance with other players. This is where it gets a bit cutthroat, because players are going to try to sit there and try to figure out the best way to get the most leverage out of a trade in a way that helps them and doesn't help you as much in taking advantage of the things you clearly need from them, only to have another player turn around and take something else from you, which makes everything you were working towards completely moot. And it kind of requires a bit more knowledge of the game. Basically, if you have the most of a performer type and also at least 3, you're going to get the star performer, which is going to give you more points. But that means if other players give you those red tiles, those gladiators that you need, but then someone else gets more gladiators in a trade, everything you work towards had no point at all ever in your life. No, just in this round of the game. Then from there, you're going to go ahead and put on performers, get paid for it, and then rinse and repeat the cycle with more money, more opportunity to continuously reinvest in the game until eventually you get to the end of the game and one player has put on the best performance and gotten the most points for it. That is basically the general idea of how you play Colosseum. A little light in some of the specific details, but that's the general arc of the game. 4 rounds of play with bidding, reinvestment, trading, performing, rinse and repeat the cycle. To that end, let's go ahead and dive into the rapid fire review, starting off with the first question I always ask: am I keeping this? And I don't think I am. Why or why not? Well, in this case, Colosseum has a lot of things that we like, that I like, that I will get to shortly. But before we get into that, the general idea for me is that I think the pacing of the game, I think there's two main problems I have it. Two main problems. There's some small things. I'll say, like, for example, I do think the nobles definitely feel a little bit more luck-based than other things. Or not necessarily luck-based, more victim to the other players and how they move around the nobles. Sometimes you can get some really solid group of nobles on your board, other times not, and I don't often feel the level of control I'd want. I'd say that's a minor nitpick. The bigger issues I have with the game overall is that the pacing of the game is set up for a certain cycle that to me feels a little repetitive and a little bit locked into that cycle. And it's very tricky to define when a game has a cycle that is working for you and you're constantly engaged in it, versus when I feel a bit more like a passenger along the way. And I sometimes feel a bit more like there's almost an artificial arc towards a certain point that ends up feeling a little samey as I play it. Like, this is a game that you dive into it, it's a great game, lots of good things, but the arc of the game is very similar and very structured as far as that, you have a certain limited amount of money, you can only buy certain things, you're going to diversify your performers, then you're going to go through the trading process. The trading process is one of my favorite parts of the game. We're going to come to that soon, but ultimately, past the trading and the bidding, which granted is the entire game, but past those two aspects where there is minute degrees of optimization around how to take advantage of the table and the other players, that's where the dynamicness of the game goes. For the most part, it is a fairly standard arc that to me doesn't feel significantly different when I dive into it game to game. So it's a very good experience, but one that feels a little bit railroad on the exact arc that you're going to get in the game, and a little samey game to game. And that holds back the enjoyment a bit for me, at least when compared to other Euro games out there. As far as other games that might be worth your attention, definitely check out Ra. Ra is an auction game that to me kind of distills that core auction mechanism, giving you a game that evolves naturally as you go through it across the rounds, as you get different tiles. Like, one of the things that's interesting here is, while you do need different performers for different, you need different performers for different performances, ultimately there's not really a difference in how they operate, and so that lends itself to the feeling of sameness here, versus in Ra, different tiles score differently. So there's an evolved differentiation in what you're trying to seek out, but also it changes how you play the game because the math is constantly changing because everything is different, versus here, different things that you need are important, but they're not actually different in how you approach them, which leads to that feeling of sameness. And then similarly, definitely check out Chinatown. If you want the cutthroat trading mentality, because this game does do trading well for me, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I like the trading phase the most, trying to figure out how to get what I need out of the phase and trying to barter with other players. I really enjoy that phase, but if you want just a distilled, pure trading game that is going to, possibly make you some friends and possibly lose you some friends, definitely check out Chinatown. As far as a counter opinion, why might this game be for you? Well, there are a lot of things that Colosseum does well. First of all, the production of this version, the production, the art, all of that, absolutely top notch, easily the best version of the game, and that's me saying this while in prototype form. Like, if you look at Colosseum and TMG, they both have things that are better about each, but this to me is clearly the best version of the game. From my perspective of seeing it, I think this is just the best looking version of the game, as well as the best overall components. I also think Colosseum has a pretty good depth to complexity ratio. The game itself is not super complicated. There's a few phases to go through. They're usually pretty intuitive, especially if you've played other games. There's some small edge case rules you have to teach people, like that noble track is a little different, small things like that. But for the most part, it's a pretty streamlined game that gives you a pretty streamlined experience. So if you're looking for a good rules complexity to depth of the experience, that's going to be fun. I do think that the trading and the bidding do involve a lot of paying attention to the other players. So if you like that kind of feeling of looking what other players have and being like, oh, you need those, so you're going to bid those, so I'm going to set up this auction to go so that you bid on that and deplete your money, that kind of observation of the other players in a way that's not super overwhelming, but does allow you to feel clever as you go through it. This game absolutely has that, both that bidding mind game as well as that trading mind game. The trading, I said I liked it. I do like the trading, trying to figure out how to take advantage of the table, and something satisfying about setting up a trade that you know won't even favor that person in the long run because you're really just going to come around, and also watching your performances escalate as you go through the game. The ability of how much you can get done in that first round versus how many points you score in that final performance, there is a nice gap there, and the game gives you lots of ways to work your way up to that. So overall, this is a pretty good trading plus auctioning game with a relatively rules light game that is doing all of that in. As far as final thoughts on Colosseum, I never played the original Days of Wonder Coliseum, but I did play the TMG one way back when, and I don't think my thoughts on this escalate or change significantly from that. There are changes they've made, make no mistake, but honestly for me it's like a 7-year gap between the two games that I don't necessarily feel the changes strongly. I do feel this is the best looking version of the game, and that definitely helps. I do feel that it's a little bit shorter, which is certainly nice as well, but past that, the general arc of the game is still Coliseum. I think if you're someone who likes Coliseum, this is this to me is probably the best version of it, but if you don't like Coliseum, I don't know if this is doing enough to change your mind. For me, I liked Coliseum before, but didn't love it or keep it, and I like Coliseum now, and do not love it or keeping it. For me, this is a 3.5 out of 5. It's a very solid re-implementation of an existing game, but it still very much is that game with some tweaks and quality of life changes. So a 3.5 out of 5. And with that, that is my rapid fire review. I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.